Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I can't quite understand how I ended up in this situation. Out of a sense of indifferent obligation, I sit here, half listening as the court-appointed marriage counselor drones on about rules, expectations, and other trivialities that, in my opinion, don't matter at all. My mind starts to wander as I take in the gloomy setting of her office. Lining the wall is a row of dark oak cabinets stuffed with books, most of which I bet she's never even opened. I'm sure she couldn't even pronounce the titles of half of them. The whole office tries too hard to look like a therapeutic space, standard diplomas on the walls, and an ultrasonic diffuser in the corner, emitting lavender or something equally uninspiring. At least the waiting room had a calming fountain, the kind you usually see in dental offices. I've always wondered if they use that soft water sound to mask the whine of drills or the muffled cries of unfortunate patients. I remember asking once, and they said the fountain was meant to soothe people while they waited. My first thought? Maybe I wouldn't need soothing if they didn't keep me waiting 50 minutes past my appointment time. My gaze shifts across the room to a wide, dark walnut desk between us. The two armchairs we're sitting in seem like relics from an era when comfort was a vague concept. They were probably last comfortable when Reagan was in office. The decor might have once been stylish, but now it all looks like she picked it up at a garage sale. Suddenly I realize she said something and is now looking at me, expecting a response. Her eyes pierce into mine. "Mr. Johnson, this is important. Are you even listening?" "Not particularly." "Could you repeat that?" I ask, trying to sound at least a little polite. Dr. Meredith Wiekenberg sighs slowly, clearly annoyed, and gives me the same look my fifth-grade teacher did when she caught me daydreaming. And what's up with her overly dramatic pronunciation of her last name? If she wanted to be called Marie, maybe she should have spelled it that way from the start. "Mr. Johnson, let me remind you that your presence here isn't just required. The court also demands your full participation. If I report that you're not cooperating, the judge could hold you in contempt of court." Protocol. I nod in response. "I understand, Dr. Wiekenberg." I'm not about to call her Marie. And why did I have to live in one of the few states that force people to attend marriage counseling? Mentally, I make a note to keep those thoughts to myself. I don't want to end up in a cell with people who robbed banks or embezzled millions just because I refuse to participate in this charade. "I get it, doctor. Please, repeat the question," I say, hoping to avoid any unnecessary issues with the judge. "Mr. Johnson," she pauses. "I'd appreciate it if you'd call me Frank," she replies. "What? But isn't your name Thomas?" she asks, confused. "Yes, but I've always liked the name Frank better." "All right, Mr. Johnson," she continues after a brief pause, as though deciding to let it go. "What are your expectations for these sessions?" I can't hold back a slight chuckle. To my surprise, I think I see a faint glimmer of humor in her eyes. Maybe by the end of this, we won't hate each other entirely. Honestly, the only thing I expect is to walk out of here divorced. At those words, the atmosphere shifts. My wife, sitting to my left, begins to sob loudly. Dr. Wiekenberg opens her mouth to respond, but stops, instead turning toward Ruby. My soon-to-be ex-wife hasn't stopped crying since we walked in. When asked the same question, she launched into a passionate speech about her mistakes and her desperate desire for one more chance to prove her love for me. And so, the session drags on. Sitting here, I can't help but reflect on the absurdity of the situation I've found myself in. My wife, the woman I've been married to for 17 years, the educated mother of our 3 young children, has decided that she needs to sleep with another man. And not just any man, but Chandler Bisbee, a second-rate actor in a late-night soap opera she's obsessed with. He's not even the main star of that ridiculous show. It all started so innocently. We decided to go out for dinner without any special reason. Lately, I'd noticed she seemed increasingly restless with the daily routines of looking after the kids and breaking up their fights. To add some variety to our lives, I arranged with her parents to watch the kids and booked us a room at a nice hotel for the night. The plan was simple: a quiet dinner, a heartfelt conversation, and maybe even a bit of dancing. I've never been much of a dancer, but Ruby has always enjoyed it. She's always been graceful on the dance floor. To surprise her, I even took a few dance lessons. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just didn't want to embarrass her. Honestly, I thought things were going well. The evening was unfolding just as I had planned. We enjoyed a wonderful dinner and then headed to the hotel club. We swayed to a slow, romantic rhythm, her head resting on my shoulder, whispering words in my ear that made me dream of what was to come later. But at that moment, when I was savoring this moment, I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned around and saw a man about my age staring directly at Ruby. "Mind if I cut in?" he asked, though it was obvious he didn't care about my response. He didn't even look at me. Before I could say anything, he'd already led her away, leaving me standing there like a statue. I stood there, bewildered, feeling everyone's eyes on me. All I wanted was to go back to our table and quietly drink my bourbon, avoiding any sort of scene. Maybe 30 minutes passed, maybe even more, before Ruby finally returned to the table. She was calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Taking a long sip from her cocktail, she casually said, "That was Chandler Bisbee," she said, as if it was something perfectly ordinary. "Who the hell is Chandler Bisbee?" I managed to say, barely containing my anger. "He's an actor from my favorite show," she replied, entirely unaffected. "If he's so famous, why haven't I heard of him? Don't you have like a dozen favorite shows?" I snapped, trying to keep control. Despite everything, I was still hoping the evening could be salvaged, that maybe Ruby and I could somehow turn things around. I was still holding on to the idea that she'd want to try that new position she'd mentioned before, something called the wheelbarrow. But my hopes crumbled when she sighed dreamily. "Chandler is such a good dancer." Suppressing my irritation, I stood up and extended my hand. "That's wonderful, dear. But how about we finish our dance? We were interrupted." She didn't move. "I already promised Chandler I'd save the rest of the dances for him tonight," she said indifferently. "What?" My voice rose before I could stop myself. "What did you just say?" "Sit down, Thomas," she whispered sharply, glancing around. "You're attracting attention." I felt the world spinning around me but sat down, sinking into the chair in complete bewilderment. Looking around the room, I felt utterly humiliated. And then I saw him, Bisbee, sprawled lazily at the other end of the room, a smug smirk on his face like a real jerk. Before I could process the situation, Ruby broke my trance by speaking again. "Listen, Tommy, I love you. I know you love me too. But I'm going to spend this weekend with Chandler. When I come back on Sunday, I'll be the same wife I've always been, faithful, loving, in every way." I stared at her, trying to grasp what she was saying. "It's just something I need to do for myself, just once. I promise," she added, as if that somehow made it better. Then she leaned over, gently kissed me on the cheek, and stood up to leave. Finally, my body reacted. I grabbed her hand, gripping it tightly, as if holding her could somehow keep her from leaving my life, even if only for the weekend. "Ruby, you need to listen to me because I won't repeat myself. We still have a chance to save our marriage, but if you go to him, I'll file for divorce first thing on Monday." My voice was calm and restrained, but she dismissed it with a wave as if she were bored. "Are you seriously going to throw everything away over this?" she replied, irritation in her voice. "Are you really ready to be a weekend dad, living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, barely making ends meet, all because of something this trivial? Grow up, Tommy. We'll talk when I get back on Sunday evening." With that, she left, not realizing the seriousness of my words. When she returned late on Sunday, the kids were already at her parents', and I had left, precisely 200 miles away, staying in my brother's basement, with no intention of returning. On Monday morning, I sat in the attorney's office preparing the divorce papers. The lawyer noted that Ruby was right in her prediction about life after divorce, though not entirely. I'd lose 35% of my income, not 30. But I didn't care about the math. The moment she dismissed me so indifferently, my love for her extinguished, like a candle in the wind. Only anger toward her remained, along with heart-wrenching sorrow over having to leave the kids. but no regrets could change my decision. One day I hope to explain it all to the kids, even if they don't understand or forgive me. When Ruby returned and found the note I'd left on the kitchen table, along with my wedding ring, a torn photo from our wedding, and my phone and laptop, she panicked. She tried contacting me at work, but they informed her I was on emergency leave. The secretary also warned her she could no longer come to the office, and that if she caused trouble, the company would file for a restraining order. I didn't learn about this immediately, but her parents later told me how she broke down upon finding what I had left behind. She burst into tears, and when she finally reached her parents' home, the weight of her actions began to sink in. For the following week, she and the kids rarely left the house. Her mental state deteriorated sharply, and her parents began to fear she might need hospitalization. She stopped eating, refused to sleep, and the kids were terrified. At her wits' end, her mother slapped Ruby, screaming that she had destroyed everything and needed to pull herself together for the kids. I almost regret not being there to witness that moment. The next day, a bailiff arrived at her parents' house to officially serve Ruby with the divorce papers. Her parents were shocked when I explained the situation to them, but, to my surprise, they took my side. They even helped me maintain contact with the children. One day they asked if I could ever forgive their daughter, whom they now referred to as dead to them. My answer was simple: no. After that, they never mentioned Ruby again, focusing solely on their grandchildren. I'll always be grateful to them for that. In the following weeks, there were numerous negotiations between our lawyers. Ruby's side kept pushing for meetings, hoping I'd agree to talk with her, but I refused each time. I first saw her again at a court-mandated counseling session. There were other sessions our lawyers tried to set up, but my attorney assured me I wasn't obligated to attend, so I didn't. Meanwhile, Ruby grew increasingly emotional, convinced that one conversation could fix everything. The irony was rich. One conversation had destroyed it all. When we finally met in court, I avoided her gaze. She tried to speak to me, but I gave no response. In hindsight, that was probably not the smartest move. Her attempts to communicate, coupled with my refusal to respond, angered the judge so much that he ordered us to attend joint counseling sessions. By then, I was filled with such rage that calling it anger issues would be an understatement. I even considered skipping the sessions, but my lawyer persuaded me not to. I briefly thought about quitting my job and disappearing altogether, but my lawyer reminded me that running away wouldn't free me from my financial obligations. Besides, I couldn't do that to my children. The answer was clear to me before I'd even considered the question. And here I am, sitting at the first of 12 court-mandated counseling sessions, already feeling like this is a waste of time. Since the moment I first met Dr. Wickenberg, I immediately understood that nothing would be getting better anytime soon. My brief moment of contemplation was interrupted by her next question. It seemed my wife had finished talking, and now all attention was back on me. "Mr. Johnson, is there anything you'd like to say to your wife?" she asked, maintaining a calm tone. "She mentioned that you haven't spoken since the incident. The incident where she left me stranded on the dance floor to spend the weekend with her new boyfriend? Is that the incident you're referring to?" I snapped, each word dripping with sarcasm. "Mr. Johnson, those kinds of remarks don't contribute to progress," she replied, her composure unwavering. "Well, that incident didn't do me any favors either, Doctor," I retorted, crossing my arms. "I understand, and I genuinely regret that you had to go through that." "No, Doctor, I have nothing to say to her," I said, leaning back in the chair, hoping to simply disappear into it. An awkward silence filled the room. No one spoke a word, and I assumed both women were surprised. After all, I hadn't spoken to Ruby in over 5 months. Why start now? Yet Dr. Wickenberg remained composed. "All right, Mr. Johnson, could you describe how you felt when Ruby left you that night?" she asked, no longer hiding behind polite phrases. I didn't know how to explain it without breaking down, and I definitely didn't want Ruby to see how shattered I was. The doctor seemed to notice my hesitation. "Why do you think Ruby would take any satisfaction from seeing that?" she asked, genuinely curious. Before I could respond, Ruby interjected, "Can you at least look at me, Tommy?" Ignoring her request, I kept my gaze on Dr. Wickenburg. "Please try to express your feelings," she gently insisted, her posture attentive, hands folded, patiently waiting. "I have never felt pain like that in my life," I began, my voice barely holding back the overwhelming emotions. "And the only conclusion I've come to is that she did it to hurt me so deeply that I could never forgive or forget." "And what was the most painful part?" The doctor stayed silent, but her expression encouraged me to continue. "She said it didn't matter. She said that destroying our trust meant nothing to her." Suddenly, Ruby's sobs grew louder, filling the room. Both the doctor and I turned to look at her. Her breathing became ragged and I feared she might pass out. "Should we call someone?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She looked as though she was about to faint. For the first time, Dr. Wickenburg appeared uncertain, so I decided to step in myself. "Ruby, calm down. If you stop crying, I promise I'll talk to you," I said in a softer voice. Her eyes cleared slightly, and she began to struggle to regain control over her emotions. I glanced at the doctor, who gestured for me to slow down. We waited in silence as Ruby slowly regained her composure. After what felt like an eternity, her sobs quieted, and she looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "Are you really going to talk to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, Ruby, I will, I promise. But you have to stay calm," I said firmly. "Remember that night? You told me to act like an adult, and that we'd discuss everything when I got home?" "Yes," she replied, her voice fragile. "So let's pretend this is that night, and we'll have that conversation now." She wiped her nose and nodded, her sobs now reduced to faint sniffles. We sat in silence, and I couldn't help but think about how Dr. Wickenburg was earning $200 an hour without giving any real advice. Instead, she just sat there, observing. Finally, after a long silence, I spoke up. "Ruby, do you have any idea of the damage you've caused? Do you understand what you did to me?" "I think I do," she whispered, her voice shaking. "And I'm so sorry. But I swear, I never wanted things to turn out this way." "It's not about what you intended to do. It's about how it affected me," I said, my voice laden with gravity, leaving no room for doubt. "You broke me, and when you downplayed it, calling your actions insignificant, it shocked me. Do you even understand what the most important thing a husband can give his wife is?" She shook her head in silence. "Loyalty," I continued. "I won't claim to speak for all men, but I believe that men aren't naturally inclined toward monogamy. Even so, I took pride in staying faithful to you. It wasn't difficult, even though I had opportunities." I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle. "You've always expected a lot. I know that. But for me, it was more than just meeting your expectations. Being faithful to you meant everything to me. That promise was sacred. And you traded it for a weekend with some second-rate actor? It destroyed me. I can't put into words the depth of that pain." I felt the tension mounting, but I wasn't finished. "And then, on top of everything, you dared to threaten me." Ruby's eyes widened in shock. "I never threatened you," she exclaimed. "Yes, Ruby, you did. You warned me about what would happen if I dared to file for divorce. I remember every word. Those words tore me apart." I could still hear them, as if it were yesterday. "You said, 'Tommy, stop being so dramatic. You're not going to destroy the family over something so trivial. Do you really want to be a part-time father, living in a tiny apartment, barely scraping by on 30% of your income?" Her expression changed as she realized what she had said, and she covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh no, Tommy. That wasn't a threat. You misunderstood. I was just explaining what divorce would mean for our family. It doesn't matter what you meant, Ruby. What matters is how it made me feel. You can't control my feelings. Your explanation changes nothing." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything we had gone through hanging over me. But the final blow, Ruby, was the loss of intimacy. We've talked about this before, about how, at the end of life, the most meaningful memories come to mind. If you've lived a good life, those moments bring you peace in your final minutes. Ruby began to cry quietly again, but this time it was different, as if she had finally accepted what was to come. Can you honestly say that the weekend you spent with Bisbee won't be one of those moments you'll remember when looking back on your life? I asked softly. She didn't need to answer. We both already knew. In reality, that weekend will probably mean more to you than all of our intimate moments together, won't it? I asked, though the answer was clear. How am I supposed to compete with that for the next 25 years? My voice was tense, barely a whisper. A long silence followed. Ruby's tears stopped, and she looked at me as if finally realizing the finality of my words. That's what you took from me, Ruby, I said, my voice calm. She exhaled slowly, the tension hanging in the air between us. After a long pause, she spoke, her tone resigned. We can't fix this, can we? It wasn't a question. She already knew the answer. No, we can't. I continued, now speaking calmly. We have two options. We can keep wasting time and money on this facade of therapy, or we can commit ourselves to doing everything for the kids. They deserve at least that, for us to make this process as smooth as possible. Do you agree? At that moment, Dr. Wiekenberg finally intervened, reminding us that our session for the week was over. She noted that we had made progress today. Ruby shook her head in disbelief. We both stood up and headed to the door. We left separately as we had arrived, each in our own car. Before we parted, we agreed to meet again, not to restore our relationship, but to decide how to move forward for the sake of our children. It was the only thing left. The next day, Ruby met with her lawyer and decided to withdraw her request for consultations. A week later, we reached a mutual understanding about joint custody, choosing an arrangement that we thought would be best for the children and help avoid financial difficulties. The agreement also specified that we would spend major holidays together as a family. Perhaps this decision came too late, but we finally started behaving like responsible adults. 6 months later, our divorce was officially finalized. 10 years later, fast forward 10 years. Ruby and I found ourselves at our younger daughter Winslow's wedding, as she married a wonderful young man named Robert. We laughed and joked about finally having married off the last child, happily guessing that now we might have a little extra money and wouldn't have to shop at discount stores anymore. We shared a sense of pride, knowing that we had raised our children well. Things hadn't always been smooth. There were difficult times along the way, but the kids seemed to handle the divorce relatively well. At least it didn't scare them off from wanting to start families of their own, which we took as a positive sign. Interestingly, despite all these years since our divorce, neither Ruby nor I remarried or even entered serious long-term relationships. In many ways, we continued to function as a family. We saw each other often, especially on holidays, although as the kids became more independent, our meetings happened less frequently. We stayed in touch through email and messages, but Winslow's wedding was the first time we had met in person in over a year. At the reception, we allowed ourselves a few drinks, and Ruby caused a scene. She started crying, begging me to come back to her, forgetting that my beautiful wife, who had given me a son, was standing right beside me. Ruby was miserable. The children had grown up and left her utterly alone, and that's the most frightening thing, to be left all alone. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.